So I say we get started. So welcome to today's webinar, where we have the pleasure to introduce our new action partner, Ulula. Ulula is a French-Canadian startup specialized on engaging suppliers and especially workers of suppliers with surveys and grievance mechanisms. So the topic today is effective and efficient supplier engagement. And supplier engagement is also a topic and a measure that is named for the various due diligence legislations that we're working with, the European CS3D, the Norwegian Transparency Act, and even the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act all mention collaboration and engagement with suppliers as one of the either preventive or remedial measures that you can take. And that's why it's my pleasure today to introduce Ulula. A few logistical words to start off. So the webinar is being recorded. You can ask questions in the Q&A section of the webinar, and I will have an eye on it, and we will try to answer your questions either during the presentation part of the webinar or at the end during the Q&A section. And we will, of course, send out the slides, the contact information of both Thomas and myself, as well as the recording of the webinar to all registered participants afterwards. The webinar will commence in 4 parts. First, I will give a quick and short introduction about the Prewave Action Platform, where Ulula is now a part of this action platform to take effective and efficient measures with risk suppliers. And then Thomas, who is the European sales lead of Ulula, will then introduce Ulula, and then we will have a joint introduction also on Ulula on the Prewave Action Platform, how it works in practice. And then we finish up with a Q&A. So to get started, and before I hand over to Thomas, a quick intro about the Prewave Action Platform. As I said before, the Prewave Action Platform covers all of the elements of the due diligence legislations that focus on the taking appropriate measure side of the risk management lifecycle. So as you all know, Prewave helps you with identifying and evaluating risks. And the action platform is now our answer to also help our customers take action in response to those identified and prioritized risks. And we bring together several action partners along types of actions such as on-site audits, desk audits, awareness trainings, and also the topic of today, supplier engagement with Ulula. And why do we need this? Yeah, the goal, as I said, is to move from a prioritized view of risks to a mitigated view of risks. And for that, we allow our more than 100 customers today to join the action platform, to take action with the risk suppliers, also take action together with shared risk suppliers. The results of those actions, an on-site audit, or the result of a worker survey with Ulula, which we will look at today, will be integrated back into the scorecard. So we have this closed loop between identifying risks and improving the supplier based on the actions we take, thereby moving a risk supplier from a maybe high-risk supplier to a medium and eventually a low-risk supplier, because we are building capacity and we are improving them, and can then at the end also build our external reporting towards authorities, CSRD, BAFA, German Supply Chain Act reporting, and so on. And also our internal reporting and impact analysis can then be built on this integrated understanding of the risks we have in our supply chain and the actions we take. One easy way to look at this is by laying out the actions on an axis from resource intensity and effectiveness. And here we see the worker surveys as part of a group that we call actions of severity level 3, which are reserved for high-risk suppliers. Trainings, desk audits, and worker surveys. And as we will see today, the worker surveys really are a great tool to take very efficient and scalable action with risk suppliers to get a better understanding of the risk profile and also start building capacity. So the action platform works in a risk-based approach as well. So we take measures based on the severity level that are reserved then for high-risk suppliers or critical risk suppliers towards the end of the risk funnel. And thereby we can actually, with a reasonable amount of measures, work in a very focused way and a risk-based approach on our most highest risk suppliers. So to wrap up, the action platform brings together specialized and vetted partners. One of the main benefits for our customers is that we will offer one contract in the action platform, and they can then take actions with all of those partners through one contract and don't have to contract with all of the partners individually. And we also offer the ability to engage in shared actions where some of our customers can join together to work on a joint risk supplier. So that is a brief overview of the Prewave Action Platform. And with that, I will hand it over to Thomas to first introduce yourself, but then also give us an introduction about Ulula, what you guys do and how it works. So over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Harald. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in this webinar, and it's great that we also launched this technology partnership with Prewave. My name is Thomas Radal. I'm based in France. I am the Europe representative of Ulula since the past 4 years. So Ulula has 10 years experience. It's basically a direct worker feedback technology company. I will explain a bit more in detail. So in the next slide, basically, is what we observe is most companies reaching out to us, they have already systems in place to monitor the human rights risk in their supply chain via auditing, via media screening, via supplier self-evaluation, etc. So in addition to that, what we bring is a simple but very important component, is actually the worker perspective on the human rights risk. So we basically enable companies to collect direct feedback from the workers at scale and in real time using the mobile technology. So, I mean, no one else than the workers themselves will know what's the reality of the working conditions in the supply chain. So let's ask them, right? This is basically the overall approach. Let's ask the people who really know the reality of the working conditions. So we basically turn the people experience at work into actionable insights for companies to monitor the human rights hotspots more efficiently. So we always tell our customers, don't wait for someone else to tell you what's the workers' true sentiment in the supply chain, but try to find out by yourself. So what you see on this on the slide here is a very simple 3-steps approach to connect workers with companies. So the first one is we collect the feedback from workers alongside supply chain, and basically workers, they will use their personal mobile phone. Either they have a smartphone or very simple feature phone. They will participate in the program in their own language. So we have 2 tools that you see at the bottom. One is the worker survey that we will make available on the Prewave platform, where basically we enable the targeted workers or communities to respond to a certain number of questions. So we will collect via the worker survey the overall sentiment from the workers on a certain number of KPI. And besides that, we have also the grievance mechanism, which helps to have a 2-way engagement with specific workers in the supply chain. So the point number 2 is that you get access to those data in real time on the dashboard, where you can see the performance of the suppliers or the countries where you are sourcing from. And ultimately, the point number 3 is that you can also respond to the grievances coming via our platform. So the platform, the grievance management platform, has been designed to align with the EU regulations, the German Supply Chain Act, and of course, the overall approach that we propose is aligned with the UNGP's effectiveness criteria. So in the next slide, this is just an example of some country benchmark. So we can aggregate the data that we receive via the surveys at the country level. So it helps to identify where workers experience more, where worker experience is more positive and where is it more negative. So the countries can be benchmarked from one another. And again, this is like the true human rights hotspot per country based on the worker feedback, right? This is not a third-party information. The ranking of the country is based on the worker own sentiment. In the next slide, we can also compare the sites one by one. So this is just examples, but we can also compare the different sites or suppliers based on their risk profile, and their risk profile or overall performance. It can be seen very clearly where at the bottom where we see more red responses, where it's basically the overall sentiment from the workers is more negative than positive. It helps to identify the sites with higher risk where more attention should be paid. So we have either the overall performance, or we can also provide more details with specific KPIs. Like you see at the center of the slide, we also rank the sites based on the overall working conditions KPI. We can also, as you see on the right, rank the sites based on different KPIs like worker well-being satisfaction, sexual harassment, recruitment practices, etc. Each survey will cover 5 to 8 different KPIs. So supplier profile is only based on the survey outcomes. So it helps to identify sites and priority areas adopting the worker perspective. So this is a very quick overview of the survey. Just 2 final words. The first one is that we act also with high ethical principles. We will engage with workers directly in the supply chain. So we have to do this with a lot of maturity and a lot of principles. So the first one I can share, we are also B Corp certified since 2021. The second one, Ulula is the co-author of the WEST principles. WEST stands for worker engagement supported by technology. And we have defined in 2013 9 key principles that any direct worker engagement technology should follow. And we encourage any technology to follow the same principles to make sure that the technology is worker-centric and accessible. And of course, we apply these principles to our programs. And lastly, the UNGP Germany, they have published the guidelines a couple of years back around grievance management, which is called worth listening. And they have mentioned Ulula for the special precautions that we take to protect the complainants. In the last slide is just some data about our impact. So as mentioned, we have 10 years experience, and we have collected the feedback from 2.2 million people around the globe so far across the different projects. We have ongoing programs in more than 50 countries, and the tools are available for workers in more than 80 languages. You see the logo of some of our partners, the private companies, multi-stakeholder initiative or standards using our technology. The top 3 sectors would be 1, manufacturing, 2, mining, oil and gas and extractive, and 3 would be agriculture. And we have lots of projects also at the farm and field level as well. So this is just a quick overview of the Ulula before we go into the details of how we apply the tool with Prewave.
Thank you, Thomas. I mean, that's a great overview. So you have 2.2 million workers engaged already, and this is, I mean, an amazing number. And you've worked with some of the largest corporates in the world, we can see on the right-hand side. So what are some of the, let's say, lessons learned out of these projects and engagements, and also maybe some of the USPs that you have built at Ulula out of these engagements?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. I mean, maybe the first thing what should differentiate Ulula would be first, I mean, the ethical principles that we apply and the strong data protection standard that we have. Second one, which is based on lessons learned as well, is the importance to have a very accessible solution. We are not engaging workers in an office. We are engaging workers with Sometimes they are illiterate, sometimes they don't have access to internet, sometimes they don't have a smartphone, they just have a very basic feature phone. So accessibility will be key for the quality of the data and to make sure that everyone will have the feeling that the tool has been designed for them. So we have a diverse number of channels, and depending on the country where we implement the program, we leverage different channels that are more relevant for the specific country. For example, if we have to onboard employees in a manufacturing site in Germany, we can use WhatsApp, for example, as one of the channel, because it's a popular channel in Germany. But if we are in China, WhatsApp is not popular. We will mainly use like WeChat or other channels. So this is one important lesson learned, is the importance to make the tool as accessible as possible for the workers to have a very good user experience. And maybe a third point I can mention is we can customize surveys. So companies, they can either use our standard surveys or they can also build their own surveys. So this is also one thing that differentiates Ulula and that we have learned. Initially, we were proposing only standard survey and we were losing a bit the benefit from the agility of the tool that we have designed. So now companies, they can use like standard survey or customize some of the questions.
Mm-hmm. And it really works globally. So you can apply it in China, in South America, in East Asia, Southeast Asia, or are there any limits to where Ulula can be applied?
We can definitely, I think we can cover more than 120 countries, something like that. So there is no specific limit. It's just that for each country, we will have to adapt a bit, as I said, the channels, the type of questions eventually, but technically we can cover in any country.
And is it always about engaging workers, or can it be stakeholders more broadly? Sometimes you have land conflict or displacement of local populations, which are also oftentimes in focus when you talk about stakeholder engagement. Is this also possible?
Yes, you're right. To make it simple, I always speak about workers, but we have many different types of stakeholders. We can engage communities, we can engage farmers in plantations. We work in oil and gas. It's a lot about also displacing population. So the tool can be used also in this context. So in fact, the tool has been designed to collect the feedback also from decentralized populations also. So it's very much applicable for communities, whatever the environment. Yeah.
Great. And there was another question, maybe a bit of a fun question. What does the name Ulula stand for? Where does it come from?
It's a very interesting question because, I asked the same question when I joined the company. And Ulula is a word in Swahili. It means to reveal. And it basically wants to share this objective to reveal the reality of the working conditions and living conditions to companies. And the logo of the owl, I don't know the reason. We have to ask the CEO.
And the last question was, do you have any experience in the automotive sector?
Yes, we have experience in the automotive sector, mainly at the mining level. This is basically where Ulula started. We started in the extractive sector, so we are connected with different supply chain for the automotive sector, and we have ongoing conversations about projects also at the manufacturing stages. But from our perspective, either it's a site doing like in the manufacturing for automotive, or I don't know, manufacturing a washing machine, or even textile and apparel. It's still, we have a population of workers, and we have to adapt how we can engage them and how we can enable them to use their personal mobile phone to participate in the program. So for us, it's more like country per country approach rather than either it's specifically automotive or other type of manufacturing sector.
Okay, great. So then let's have a bit of a more detailed look in how Ulula now works together with Prewave and on the Prewave Action Platform. So with that, I hand it back to you, Thomas, to give us a first intro into the different options that Ulula offers.
Yeah, sure. So we have 4 major types of surveys. And with the Prewave Action Platform, we envision to offer all of them, but for now we will focus in only one. So I will explain that in details. So we have a bank of more than 350 questions, and this will be used to perform different types of survey. The first one that you see is basically the country profile survey. I shared screenshots before. The objective is to enable companies to further identify the sourcing countries or countries of operations where there are major risks and major priorities adopting the worker perspective. So we will perform a survey across selected communities or selected suppliers in these different sourcing countries to aggregate the data at the country level in order to further prioritize where additional investigation should be performed. So it goes to the next one, which is basically the survey or the supplier evaluation. So once you have identified the countries at risk, you can perform survey across specific suppliers, either your strategic suppliers or all your suppliers in a specific region or hotspot. And we will cover usually 20 questions. We cover multiple different KPIs that are relevant to understand the overall performance of the suppliers based on the worker feedback on those KPIs that we propose to them. Then we have another survey, which is mainly designed to monitor specific suppliers or specific regions known to be hotspots in terms of human rights. So we have more thematic surveys, and we can propose like a monthly survey. So every month, the workers or communities that we target will respond to a set between 5 to 10 questions on one specific thematic. And basically, every month we perform the survey so we can track the evolution of the risk. And ultimately, the fourth survey is the survey we call investigation survey or deep dive survey. Is whenever there is a grievance or an abuse identified either via the Prewave suite of tools or Ulula grievance management platform or any other tool. If you identify specific supplier where there was some abuse, for example, we can perform a specific survey, for example, on sexual harassment, recruitment practices, to basically identify how many workers are potentially affected by this abuse, right? So most of the time we know that 1, 2, 3 workers, they have been affected, but to take the appropriate measures, we need to know how systemic is the problem. So among those 4 options, the one we will propose via the Prewave platform for now is the second one, where we will define a survey at the supplier level in order to monitor specific supplier already identified via the Prewave platform. And I will speak a bit more in the next slide about how this survey will speak about. So Ulula and Prewave standard survey that we have defined will be accessible on smartphones for the first launch. It will cover 20 questions. It is designed to take 5 to 7 minutes per worker to take the survey. And of course, it will be free for workers, right? So there is no barrier for workers to take the survey. So about the survey itself, it will be a standard set of questions available in multiple languages, and it will be anonymous like any survey we perform. So the objective of the survey will be really to understand the overall sentiment from the workers, not to understand what Harald responded or what Thomas responded, because this is not the objective of the tool. And we target a participation rate that varies between 10 to 80%, depending on the size of the factory, in order to validate the data with a significant confidence interval. Some of the KPI that will be covered are around satisfaction at work, pay and remuneration, harassment, health and safety, working hours, etc. So those are some of the KPI that will be covered via this standard survey.
And these indicators are also aligned with the requirements of, let's say, the due diligence legislations, which are exactly covering these types of human rights, working conditions, health and safety topics at the workplace.
Right. Yeah. So there are also general KPIs that aims to understand basically the overall performance of the site against those KPIs that you mentioned.
All right, and then let's look at a very specific example and the process of how Prewave and Ulula now work together on the action platform. So the first step, of course, is to work with Prewave. Maybe let me bring up a quick demo here, where I'm in the Prewave system. I'm doing my risk analysis for hundreds, maybe even thousands of suppliers based on the risk matrix approach, where we have suppliers with high risk towards the right and suppliers where we have a significant leverage and influence on the top. So we are focusing on the prioritized suppliers on the top right. This is the ones where we have high action priority. And then we move into the recommendation and action planning module, where the system then recommends actions that, of course, the customer can select, enable in the action platform, trainings, audits that are appropriate to the risk score, and also the previous actions that we have completed with the given supplier. So here we have a risk supplier. They have a rather low score, so meaning they are high risk, particularly in the areas of labor rights and health and safety. And then the system recommends a stakeholder engagement and also an awareness training. So we are now at the severity level 3. And then out of the Prewaves system, we can seamlessly take this action and also with the click of a button, then book Ulula as our partner for this stakeholder engagement. And this will then continue the process where then Ulula will be informed and a representative of Prewave will coordinate with Ulula to then engage on this worker survey. So Thomas, back to you to explain how this then works in practice.
Sure. Yeah, so when the survey is being booked, basically we will coordinate between the company, Prewave and Ulula, the survey deployment for the targeted supplier or different suppliers. So we will basically guide the company in how to engage the supplier. And basically for the first launch of the program, the deployment approach would be that we will basically empower the factory management with the flyers and posters so they can themselves promote the survey among the workers. So we will provide guidance and clear instructions, and basically they will be empowered to promote the survey among workers. So then on the third step is that once the factory management has promoted the survey will be live for a period of 5 to 10 days to workers, for workers to complete the survey. As mentioned before, we need as many workers as possible to participate. So we will know from the supplier what is the total population, and we will define a targeted population to participate in the survey. So Ulula will monitor on the platform the participation rate. We will check if we have 100, 200, 300 workers participating. Basically, once the survey participation is back to be stable and we have reached the desired sample size, we'll close the survey and move to the step number 4, which is proceeding to the reporting.
Mm-hmm. And then in the case of the engagement with Prewave and Ulula, Ulula will provide then a PDF report that summarizes the results of the worker survey that will be added to the Prewave system. It will then be added also to the scorecard, considering the KPIs of the survey results. And then, let's say, a good survey will then improve the overall risk profile of the supplier, can move a supplier from a high risk red color supplier to maybe a yellow or green color supplier if they have very good performance. Because oftentimes the risk that we identify in Prewave can still be quite abstract. Yeah? So let's say you have cases where you see country risk, industry risk, maybe some issues in the past, but such a survey can be a more concrete also step of gathering feedback in the sense of stakeholder engagement. let's maybe have a look at how some of these examples actually, some of these survey results as a PDF can look like in practice. Maybe Thomas, you can quickly explain what we see here.
Yeah. So this is an example of report that I have anonymized from one of the survey we have performed in a site in China, for example. So, but this is basically the type of PDF report that companies booking the survey would receive. So the next, yeah, in each survey always includes some demographic questions. So even though the survey is anonymous, we can still get to know how many male, female workers participated, how many local workers or migrant workers participated, because those are different populations and we want to know if there is any specific vulnerable population on site. So we can adjust those demographic questions, but you will have a page with this type of information. And then if you go to the next page, yeah, so we will provide basically the different performance indicators. So you will see each question, what's the percentage of positive and negative answers from the workers that we have targeted. So we do the ranking, and usually the most priority areas would be at the bottom. So if you scroll to the last ones, we see, for example, that in this survey, the most negative question was around working hours. Like half of the workers, they complained that, they responded negatively to the question, do you work more than 60 hours per week, etc. So this is how the data should be analyzed to identify where are the priorities from the worker perspective. And in the next slide, we provide basically the men and women comparison. So as mentioned before, this is to understand if there is any specific discrimination or any specific population at risk. So here, those are exactly the same KPI, but we are only looking at where there is a gap between the responses from the men and the responses from the women. So on this particular example, where we see the major gap is the same question, do you work more than 60 hours per week? We see a significant difference of nearly 10 points between men and women here. And in the next slide, we also provide a comparison with migrant and non-migrant comparison. So this is same questions, but we only have a different breakdown, and we will focus on where we see major gaps. So if you scroll just a little bit down, the major KPI where we see the gap is do you work more than 60 hours per week? We see that basically 63% of the workers, migrant workers, they responded negatively to this question. So the survey helped to identify that there is a specific topic here that excessive working hours are mainly affecting migrant workers here. So one thing that I can also mention, that this survey was performed together with a social audit. This is also something that can be done. And those data can help to complement the social audit outcomes to be more specific and efficient to detect the abuses here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing this, Thomas. And so these results, as I mentioned before, will then be added back into the Prewaves profile. You will be able to download the PDF to look at it also on that level of detail. And we will calculate KPIs that are added to the scorecard. And then we have two options. Either we have a good survey, more or less green, the supplier improves, or if you see, let's say, highlighted, as also we just saw in this example, maybe some areas of improvement, then there can be, let's say, further measures recommended. This could be either working again with Ulula, implementing some of their other tools and options they have, such as grievance mechanisms or doing deep dive surveys. Or it could also be on-site audits or other measures that then go the next step. And with that, we are, let's say, from identifying a risk towards having the results. Thomas, how long does this take, this period? You say here 5 to 10 days for a worker to complete, but you think typically from starting the booking and onboarding, how long is it taking until we have the results ready?
Yeah, so because the survey will be standardized and will be already translated in multiple languages, so we can consider approximately 2 weeks for the onboarding phase, which is the time to inform the supplier, coordinate a bit. It's approximately 2 weeks. then the supplier can start the promotion of the survey. They usually take 2-3 days to just figure out, print the posters, get things ready. And then you have the period of 5 to 10 days. So altogether, you can consider about a month from the onboarding to get the results.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely great. So yeah, with that, we end the presentation part of this webinar, but there's already plenty of questions that we can tackle, and I will start one by one. One question that we already touched upon, or maybe we mention it again because it's very important. How do you deal with workers not having access to smartphones? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so there are two things here. That's a very good question. We can enable workers participating with a very basic feature phone, because we'll do audio recording of questions in different languages. So workers on the posters that will be distributed, they will have, for example, either a QR code that they can scan if they have a smartphone to access the survey, or a phone number that they can call if they have just a very basic feature phone, and they will listen to the questions audio recorded, and they type like 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for I don't know, and then it goes to the next question. So this is how we also make the survey accessible for workers with basic feature phone and also illiterate. However, for the first launch, we are enabling the companies to perform the survey on smartphones only. So the survey will be accessible mainly for the countries where smartphone coverage is high, and we can advise on that. We have the data about the smartphone coverage. And eventually, later in the Prewave platform, we will also make available the survey via any type of mobile phone.
Another question was, how do you actually get to the contact data of the workers? You mentioned putting up some QR codes and so on, but can you explain this? And also, is there a chance to have some fraudulent activities from the company, that they maybe fake some answers, or how do you deal with that?
No. So those are two different points. The first one is basically how the onboarding works. And we have two major ways to do that remotely. Okay, so by remotely, I mean no one will go on site to promote the survey. One is that we basically provide the posters, flyers to the management. We provide a soft copy, and they will do the printing, and they are in charge of promoting the survey themselves. So what we see most of the time, they will put some posters in the canteen area, in the dormitories, in some of the public places, as well as the toilet. And they do announcement via the factory speakers. And they can also share the word with the worker representatives. So they leverage different approaches, and we provide those different best practices to the factory management. So this is approach number one, where management will promote the survey. Approach number two is complementary. We can also ask the management to share with us the list of phone numbers of the workers. So they have it in some cases, the HR team they have. We don't need any name, any position, only the list of workers. So if we have a site with 1,000 workers, we have to receive approximately 1,000 phone numbers. It will be uploaded via a secured link in our platform, and Ulula can generate an automated call to these numbers, so workers, they can receive like a call to take the survey. A third option is that we send someone on site to do like a third-party on-site facilitation. But again, for the first launch, we are not yet offering this the service. So this is more about how the promotion works. Then workers, as soon as they have been informed about the tool, they can either participate immediately, or they can take some flyers back home and participate later. They will have on the flyers a unique 4-digit ID that they have to inform when taking the survey. So we know that the responses are coming from this factory or this factory. Then to the question about potential fraud, our main objective is to get the response from as many workers as possible. This is how we basically get the understanding of the overall sentiment. And there is always a margin of error, right? This is social science. Whenever you do a survey, you have a margin of error. And depending on the total participation rate, we minimize the margin of error. So we will target usually 95% confidence interval and 5% margin of error. So for example, if we have a population of 1,000 workers, we target approximately 250 responses. Okay, this is the point number one. Then we have ways to prevent the fraud. For example, one mobile phone can answer only once the survey. Okay, so it cannot be the management responding 100 times the survey, things like that. So one mobile phone, one participation to the survey. Then we can also randomize the order of the questions, meaning that one person will not take exactly the same survey as the other, which also makes eventually coaching more difficult. And lastly, to detect eventually the fraud, we will look at the time tag for each survey. For example, we know that in average, our surveys were designed to take 5 to 7 minutes. If we see that majority of workers, they respond in 3 to 4 minutes, it means that somehow they know how to answer the question. So we would detect this. And last thing is, if you see everything looks perfect, this is also a signal that there was some attempt to influence the score, because in all the survey that we perform, there is always more or less KPI that are positive or negative, like satisfaction. No one is 100% satisfied about their work. So those are also ways that we can detect the fraud, and we will signal this to the companies, and eventually we can take additional actions. I hope I answered the questions here.
I think it was a very good answer. So another question we got now a few times is, what do the workers get from participating? Is it just a way to complain, or is there some other benefit to them, or do they do this on their own? And then what is your experience with that?
Yeah, that's also one thing that we learned in the past few years performing survey. The major benefit, and basically what will keep the participation high from one survey to another, is that they see improvements after participating in the survey, right? So if overall there is a big problem about sexual harassment and there is no improvement, they will a bit lose the interest of participating in the survey after some time, and the participation will go down. So main benefit from workers is basically to improve the overall working environment or living environment. Then in some cases, to boost the participation, we can include some small financial incentive. So worker participating get a chance to receive like a lucky draw, randomly distributed among workers. So it can be like an airtime mobile credit, like they can receive, I don't know, $2 of mobile credit or a gift card, etc. So those are approaches that we use in some cases. And the last potential benefit for workers is also to get informed about the survey outcomes. So in some cases, we can also broadcast information. So every worker participating can receive a small SMS with a short recap about the survey outcomes. So they really have the feeling that what are the major outcomes from the survey. And we can also provide a small poster to the factory management, so they can also share a poster with the major outcomes from the survey. And again, they can put this poster in canteen areas, in some areas, so workers can also see what are the outcomes from the survey. This is more like to close the feedback loop and make sure workers, they understand that this feedback was taken into account. So those are the options. We do not apply all of them for every survey. It really depends a bit on the objective of the survey, the dynamic, how often we have to do the survey, etc.
How often do you encounter some resistance from the companies to say, we don't want to do this? What are your experiences with that? And are there some ways to overcome this?
Yeah, so in general, some companies, they will introduce the survey as this is part of their social auditing program, for example. So because companies, they are already familiar with social audit, so they see this as just an additional component of companies' due diligence systems. In general, we see like 70% of the suppliers accepting the survey without much resistance, and 30% they need more hand-holding, they will have more questions, sometimes they have concerns. So how to address that? First, this resistance mainly depends on the quality of the dialogue between the companies and their suppliers at the moment. And if they have, so that's the first point. We very often see the same reason for resistance is the company, the suppliers, they fear that they will have no opportunity to share their perspective on the survey outcomes. So it is important to mention that in the process, they will receive also some feedback about the survey, and they will have a chance also to share their perspective and propose improvement plans. So this is the key resistance that we see, is basically the potential impact on the business and the ability to respond. So we share guidance to the companies, and when we introduce the survey to the suppliers, we try to address this topic. The last and kind of the ultimate approach is to send someone on site to do like a third-party promotion of the survey, but it anyway requires kind of some acceptance by the suppliers to perform the survey here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes sense, yeah. There's one question which is, I'd say, maybe a bit specific to Germany and Austria, but the work council, called the Betriebsrat, which is basically the union of workers within the company, who even in Germany and Austria, in many large companies, sits on the board of directors. Have you had any experience with, let's say, such large companies with their worker councils? Do they support such initiatives for the suppliers or for their own business area? Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And some labor unions are also using our tools. So we work, for example, in Qatar with labor unions. They are using our tool to collect the feedback from workers and to have more concrete data to support their action. But we have performed some surveys in Europe, in France, in Bulgaria, and different countries where there is a strong union culture. The objective is not to bypass them. The objective is more to even detect where additional social dialogue could be interesting and required. So they have also a role to play. And when we deploy the survey, we inform the management. We provide them the poster, flyers, and best practices. And among those best practices, one is, of course, to inform the worker representative or unions on site to define what is the best approach to promote the survey among workers. So we cannot ourselves directly engage with them, but we can only recommend the management to engage with the unions to define what's the best approach and how to promote the survey. And what they also require most of the time is to get also some visibility about the survey outcomes. Again, we will share the feedback with the factory management with the recommendation to share those feedback with worker representative.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And what size of companies do you typically work with? Is there some kind of a sweet spot, or does it really matter? You can work with 50 companies of 50 employees, 250, 10,000. Like, is there some limit or some sweet spot for you?
Yeah, there is no maximum, but there is usually minimum. It's like approximately 20 workers minimum, 20 to 30 workers. Why? Is to make sure that we do not impact the anonymity, because even though the responses are anonymous, if you provide a breakdown male, female, and you have only 20 workers on site, it may affect the response from some of the workers. So to make sure we protect the workers and we keep our commitment of anonymity, we need a minimum of approximately 20 to 30 workers on site. And if somehow the participation in those sites were very low, we do not always share the detailed outcomes to the factory management. So this is just how we address that. But there is no maximum. It's just that we will define, depending on the factory size, what is the participation rate that we will target.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And maybe one other question. Let's say, can the survey be used for workers to just, they complain about bad pay, they would like to be paid more, it's might not be really a human rights or labor rights issue. It's just that they have some complaints that are very normal and human. Can you differentiate these types of things from the real complaints? And is it maybe also cultural? Can it be culturally different that some countries, they like to complain more?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's anytime you do a survey, you face this situation. And again, there are multiple answers to that. The first one is, this is why I mentioned it's important to get the response from as many people as possible to increase the confidence level. There will be, during the survey, the day of the survey, people that are very unhappy and people that are particularly happy today because there is some good thing for them. What we need is basically the response from as many workers to basically understand the overall feedback from the population. But this is for sure that during the survey, some workers will try to influence the response, or they say we want to be paid more, so they say they are not happy with their remuneration. We do not frame the question like, are you happy with your remuneration? Because we'll get probably 99% responses negative here. So first thing is that we need the response from as many people as possible to reduce the BAs of some workers trying to influence eventually the results. To the way we formulate the question, it's not like, are you happy or not happy with the remuneration? We are not asking this type of questions to be straightforward. Yeah, I think these are some of the things. The last point is the side-by-side comparison. As you said, there is a BAs per country, cultural BAs, but if you perform the survey across 10 sites in Germany, you kind of eliminate the BAs related to Germany because you will see the same BAs across the different sites. So this is basically what's very interesting in being able to compare the sites and analyzing the site is you get to know if overall there is always at least 5% of the workers in Germany very unhappy, whatever questions, and then you can eliminate and try to see in which site you see more than 5% issues, or so that's also benchmarking is helping to reduce the BAs here.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we covered a lot of ground today, and this was super interesting. Thanks, Thomas, for joining us. We are already piloting Ulula with some of the first customers, and we are gathering also first experience between Ulula and Prewave, and maybe we can have in a couple of months another webinar, then sharing and expanding on some of these experiences and outcomes. I think it would be very interesting to stay in touch. But yeah, thank you, Thomas, for joining us today. As I mentioned in the beginning, we will send out the slides of today's webinar, as well as the recording of today's webinar, and also the contact information of Thomas and myself. So with that, we also thank everybody for joining, and yeah, especially you, Thomas, for joining as well. Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks a lot for all the questions as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks, guys. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.